Chapter 10. Rob was sweeping the laundry room when Willie Mae, the Kentucky Star's housekeeper, came in and threw herself down in one of the metal chairs that were lined up against the cement block wall. "You know what?" she said to Rob. "No, ma'am," said Rob. "I'll tell you what," said Willie Mae. She reached up and adjusted the butterfly clip in her thick black hair. "I'd rather be sweeping up after some pigs in a barn than cleaning up after the people in this place. Pigs at least give you some respect." Rob leaned on his broom and stared at Willie Mae. He liked looking at her. Her face was smooth and dark, like a beautiful piece of wood. And Rob liked to think that if he had been the one who carved Willie Mae, he would have made her just the way she was, with her long nose and high cheekbones and slanted eyes. "What are you staring at?" Willie Mae asked. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing out of school?" Rob shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "What do you mean you don't know?" Rob shrugged again. "Don't be moving your shoulders up and down in front of me, acting like some skinny old bird trying to fly away. You want to end up cleaning motel rooms for a living?" Rob shook his head. "That's right. Ain't nobody wants this job. I'm the only fool Beauchamp can pay to do it. You gotta stay in school," she said, "else you'll end up like me." She shook her head and reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a single cigarette and 2 sticks of 8-ball licorice gum. She put one piece of gum in her mouth, handed the other one to Rob, lit her cigarette, leaned back in the chair, and closed her eyes. "Now," she said. The scent of smoke and licorice slowly filled the laundry room. "Go on and tell me why you ain't in school." "On account of my legs being all broke out," said Rob. Willie Mae opened her eyes and looked over the top of her glasses at Rob's legs. She said after a minute. "How long you had that?" "About 6 months," said Rob. "I can tell you how to cure that," said Willie Mae, pointing with her cigarette at his legs. "I can tell you right now. Don't need to go to no doctor." "Huh?" said Rob. He stopped chewing his gum and held his breath. What if Willie Mae healed him, and then he had to go back to school? "Sadness," said Willie Mae, closing her eyes and nodding her head. "You keeping all that sadness down low in your legs? You not letting it get up to your heart where it belongs? You gotta let that sadness rise on up." "Oh," said Rob. He let his breath out. He was relieved. Willie Mae was wrong. She couldn't cure him. "The principal thinks it's contagious," he said. "Man ain't got no sense," Willie Mae said. "He's got lots of certificates," Rob offered. "They're all framed and hung up on his wall." "I bet he ain't got no certificate for sense, though," said Willie Mae darkly. She rose up out of her chair and stretched. "I gotta clean some rooms," she said. "You ain't going to forget what I told you about them legs, are you?" "No, ma'am," said Rob. "What'd I tell you then?" she said, towering over him. Willie Mae was tall, the tallest person Rob had ever seen. "To let the sadness rise," Rob said. He repeated the words as if they were part of a poem. He gave them a certain rhythm, the way Willie Mae had when she said them. "That's right," said Willie Mae. "You got to let the sadness rise on up." She left the room in a swirl of licorice and smoke. After she was gone, Rob wished that he had told her about the tiger. He felt a sudden desperate need to tell somebody who wouldn't doubt him, somebody who was capable of believing in tigers. Chapter 11. That afternoon, Rob was out in front of the Kentucky Star, weeding between the cracks in the sidewalk when the school bus rumbled up. "Hey!" he heard Norton Threemonger yell. Rob didn't look up. He concentrated on the weeds. "Hey, disease boy!" Norton shouted. "We know what you got. It's called leprosy." "Yeah," Billy shouted. "Leprosy. All of your body parts are going to fall off. They're going to rot off," Norton yelled. "Yeah," Billy screamed. "That's what I meant. Rot. They're going to rot off." Rob stared at the sidewalk and imagined the tiger eating Norton and Billy Threemonger and then spitting out their bones. "Hey!" Norton shouted. "Here comes your girlfriend, disease boy." The bus coughed and sputtered and finally roared away. Rob looked up. Sistine was walking toward him. She was wearing a lime green dress. As she got closer, he could see that it was torn and dirty. "I brought your homework," she said. She held out a red notebook stuffed full of papers. The knuckles on her hand were bleeding. "Thank you," said Rob. He took the notebook. He was determined to say nothing else to her. He was determined to keep his words inside himself, where they belonged. Sistine stared past him at the motel. It was an ugly 2-story building, squat and small, composed entirely of cement black. The doors of each room were painted a different color, pink or blue or green, and there was a chair, painted in a matching color, sitting in front of each door. "Why is this place called the Kentucky Star?" Sistine asked. "Because," said Rob. It was the shortest answer he could think of. "Why?" she asked. Rob sighed. "Because Beauchamp, the man who owns it, he had a horse once called Kentucky Star." "Well," said Sistine, "it's a stupid name for a hotel in Florida." Rob shrugged. It started to rain. Sistine stood in front of him and continued to stare. She looked at the motel, and then over at the blinking Kentucky Star sign, and then she looked back at him, as if it was all a math equation she was trying to make come out right in her head. The rain made her hair stick to her scalp. It made her dress droopy. Rob looked at her small, pinched face and her bleeding knuckles and dark eyes, and he felt something inside of him open up. It was the same way he felt when he picked up a piece of wood and started working on it, not knowing what it would be, and then watching it turn into something he recognized. He took a breath. He opened his mouth and let the words fall out. "I know where there's a tiger." Sistine stood in the drizzly rain and stared at him, her eyes black and fierce. She didn't say, "A real one?" She didn't say, "Are you crazy?" She didn't say, "You're a big old liar." She said one word, "Where?" And Rob knew then that he had picked the right person to tell. Chapter 12. "We gotta walk through the woods," Rob said. He looked doubtfully at Sistine's bright dress and shiny black shoes. "You can give me some of your clothes to wear," she told him. "I hate this dress anyway." And so he took her to the motel room, and there Sistine stood and stared at the unmade beds and the tattered recliner. Her eyes moved over his father's gun case and then went to the macaroni pan from the night before, still sitting on the hot plate. She looked at it all the same way she had looked at the Kentucky Star sign and the motel and him, like she was trying to add it up in her head. Then she saw his carvings, the little wooden village of odd things that he had made. He had them all on a TV dinner tray beside his bed. "Oh," she said. Her voice sounded different, lighter. "Where did you get those?" She went and bent over the tray and studied the carvings, the blue jay and the pine tree and the Kentucky Star sign, and the one that he was particularly proud of, his father's right foot, life-size and accurate right down to the little toe. She picked them up one by one and then placed them back down carefully. "Where did you get them?" she asked again. "I made 'em," said Rob. She did not doubt him, as some people would. Instead, she said, "Michelangelo, the man who painted the Sistine ceiling, he sculpted too." "You're a sculptor," she said. "You're an artist." "Nah," said Rob. He shook his head. He felt a hot wave of embarrassment and joy roll over him. It lit his rash on fire. He bent and rubbed his hands down his legs, trying to calm them. When he straightened back up, he saw that Sistine had picked up the carving of her. He had left it lying on his bed, intending to work on it again in the evening. He held his breath as she stared at the piece of the wood. It looked so much like her, with her skinny legs and small eyes and defiant stance, that he was certain she would be angry. But once again, she surprised him. "Oh," she said, her voice full of wonder. "It's perfect. It's like looking in a little wooden mirror." She stared at it a minute more and then carefully laid it back on his bed. "Give me some clothes," she said, "and we'll go see the tiger." He gave her a pair of pants and a t-shirt and left the room and went outside to wait for her. It was still raining, but not hard. He looked at the falling Kentucky Star. He thought for a minute about one of the not wishes he had buried deepest. A friend. He stared at the star and felt the hope and need and fear course through him in a hot neon arc. He shook his head. "Nah, he said to the Kentucky Star. Nah. And then he sighed and stuck his legs out into the rain, hoping to cool them off, hoping to get some small amount of relief.